I'm Natasha Kirchuk, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, the French elections come to a close today. Hamas elects a new terror chief, and an Israeli athlete helps raise refugee awareness in a very special way. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. It's not that easy to find unity between Jewish and Muslim leaders, but if there's one thing that they have seemed to reach consensus on, it's keeping Marine Le Pen from being elected the president of France in the elections taking place today. Much to the horror of the country's minority communities, the leader of the far-right National Front Party is one step closer to winning the election. Over the weekend, hackers released confidential documents linked to her competitor, the centrist candidate Emmanuel Macron. Le Pen regularly condemns the building of mosques and is against the wearing of the Islamic veil and even school lunches that don't serve pork. The president of the Grand Mosque of Paris is now taking the unprecedented step of calling on the 5 million Muslims in France to vote against her.
Nous craignons que Madame Marine Le Pen présente un programme d'extrême droite, un programme de rejet de l'Europe, de rejet de l'immigration, de rejet de gens qui pratiquent la religion musulmane, et nous craignons une attitude xénophobe ou raciste à partir de cette vision de Madame Marine Le Pen, et évidemment les musulmans seraient très en danger.
Leaders of France, 500,000 Jewish citizens are asking their community to cast ballots for Macron, whether or not they agree with his policies. French Jews see Le Pen as a threat and doubt claims she's eradicated anti-Semitic and Holocaust denial policies, once deeply rooted in her extremist party.
For many reasons, French Jews do not believe that the National Front can really change on these issues. The voters, the supporters of the National Front are still the same. So she wants to get a kind of cautious stamp from the French Jews in order to get legitimacy and credibility in the world public debate in France. And for sure will not give that to her.
And this anti-far-right rallying cry isn't just coming from religious leaders. Politicians from across the spectrum are also appealing to voters to disregard any concerns about Emmanuel Macron and vote for him in the second and final round, simply to prevent Marine Le Pen from becoming president. Following up on the French presidential race, we at ILTV decided to head to a French polling station right here in Tel Aviv to get the scoop on what French citizens in Israel are thinking and feeling about this election.
I'm coming here to vote. Basically, I was pretty sure I was going to vote Macron because everyone knows that Le Pen has something against Jews. So that's why I voted Macron.
It is so important because with all the previous election about the Brexit and also about the American presidential election, and also the fact that we had a lot of big candidates this year with very different point of view, like we have to choose a way, like leaving Europe or staying in Europe. So all these issues makes this election so important.
Because I strongly believe on what he says, and that it is right, and I also strongly believe that what she says, Marine Le Pen, is very bad for everyone. If she would have won, we can expect that France will be back 100 or 200 years.
Marine Le Pen, she's a fascist. She hates everybody. We will lose the French citizenship and the Israeli citizenship, which I don't want.
We are here today because we want candidate Emmanuel Macron to be elected, because we want a big barrier to the candidate of the fascist party, and which is the party of Mrs. Le Pen. But we are now committed that the French of Israel will elect Mr. Macron, because we have no choice. You know, myself, I'm a grandchild of a deportee, a child of a resistance member, a child of volunteer in the French army, and we have no choice. And even if what their message is clear, that they want more security in France, there is a real danger.
Joining me today in the studio is Likud Knesset member Sharon Haskel to discuss the rise of anti-Semitism throughout the United States. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
All right, so I understand that you just arrived back from a speaking tour of U.S. college campuses to discuss anti-Semitism, this very issue. Now, why do you think anti-Semitism is becoming more and more prevalent throughout the United States?
Well, I think there's a lot of anti-Israelis organizations that are actually using Israel as a front, but actually are attacking the Jewish community throughout the entire United States. So I've been to a few campuses like NYU and Columbia and Harvard and Brandeis, very, top schools, top universities. And you know what? I was absolutely shocked. Some of the students have told me stories, that their freedom of speech is being taken away from them. They can't express themselves. They can't express their opinion. In Passover, students in Harvard, which is an Ivy League university, only the Jewish student received on their doors eviction notices. I don't know if you know what our eviction notice is, but I mean, this is a racist thing to do, just to target and attack Jewish students on campus.
But do you know why we're seeing this rise? Is there any indication as to why there is this rise? Is it in any way related to the election of Donald Trump?
So some people have tried to imply that, but I really don't think so. I mean, racism, anti-Semitism is something that grew through years, through, educating your kids in that kind of way, being brainwashed by different TVs, by certain things. It takes years to become like that. And so, when someone comes and tells me that within 3 months, suddenly this whole thing happened, I really don't take that.
We are seeing, though, a rise of nationalist sentiment taking place in the United States, and typically in the past when that has happened, Jews have suffered as a result. Is that something that we should be worrying about in connection to the anti-Semitism as a whole?
Well, first of all, I think that the rise in anti-Semitism has happened throughout the entire world at the moment. I mean, we can see really bad cases in South America, in Europe, terrible cases of racism towards the Jewish community. I think that there's a strong American community, Jewish community, supporters of Israel or supporters of the Jewish community that actually try to fight it. And so I think that you see it less in the United States and in Canada rather than other countries like, for example, in Europe, in France, in Belgium.
We're seeing these growing ultra-nationalist political parties. Now, here's my question for you. We're seeing you saw a lot of these young students who are very concerned about rising anti-Semitism. Do you think this is in any way affecting their relationship with the state of Israel and whether or not they feel comfortable even associating themselves with the state of Israel?
So it creates two situations. One of them is students who are so hurt by it, and some of them are so afraid to actually speak their mind, to say what they believe. I mean, when you look at Israel, Israel is part of a Jewish identity, whether you like it or not. This is part of our history. It's part of our culture. This is where all of our values and beliefs and everything have come from. And so as a Jew, you cannot separate really yourself from the state of Israel.
But we're seeing that happen oftentimes in the United States.
Absolutely. You see students who just want to assimilate, to be part of the society, to be part of campus. And, with all of this propaganda going around about Israel, they say, okay, well, I just want to be normal. I don't want to put myself in the middle of this fight, And so they try to alienate themselves from Israel, and that creates part of a problem in their identity as well. How much am I Jewish? How much am I American? Right. What is right? What is wrong? Just, so it's created a big problem within themselves.
Well, it seems like, it's very, very necessary for more and more officials from Israel to travel to the United States and try to work with these communities. I think you're doing a good job so far, so thank you so much for coming
Absolutely.
in. All right. Ever since shooting attacks against Israeli civilians have escalated in recent years, the army has been waging a very successful special operation to rid the West Bank of illegal weapons. Israeli special forces are setting their sights on suspected gun-making sites in the Palestinian territories and carrying out raids at least once a week. In 2016, a total of 450 firearms were confiscated from 44 different workshops. And so far, in just the first quarter of 2017, 150 guns have been seized, while 20 more makeshift factories have been detected and destroyed. A senior intelligence officer says the focus on Arab manufacturers and dealers isn't only cutting off the source of the deadly weapons, but ramping up the cost of the tens of thousands still being passed around on the streets of the West Bank. For example, the price of the terrorist weapon of choice, the Carlos submachine gun, is more than 5 times more expensive now. It jumped from around $450 in May of 2016 to nearly $2,000 the same time this year. More advanced models can run as high as $2,700. Given that the average Palestinian resident only earns a little more than $800 a month, the Israeli army mission to choke off supply has driven enormous price hikes. Potential assailants now have to shell out more than 2 months of wages instead of a 2-week paycheck to get their hands on the same weapon last year. This unavailability of cheap firearms is heavily being attributed to a corresponding drop in the number of spontaneous shooting attacks being perpetrated against Israeli civilians and soldiers. The Hamas terror organization in Gaza has just elected a new leader. Ismail Haniyeh has been tapped to be the new head, and he will replace Khalid Mashal, who's just finished his 2 terms in office. ILTV's Aaron Porras returns with more. So, Aaron, set the scene for this election.
All right. Well, as you said, Khalid Mashal is stepping down as Hamas has a 2-term limit. And he's just reached that 2-term limit despite working from exile in Qatar, which I always thought was very interesting. And the elections are very big news for 2 reasons. Number one, because it actually legitimizes, in a sense, the democracy that is the Hamas terror organization, which is kind of an oxymoron. And the second reason is because this is the first time since 2007, when Hamas split away from the Palestinian Authority, that they're going to have a new leader. So this is really big.
Well, let's check out your report.
All right, let's go.
Mashal first came into power in 2004 after the Israeli assassinations of the group's founders, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin and Abdelaziz al-Rantisi. Ismail Haniyeh is a former Palestinian prime minister who was dismissed by Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas in 2007 following Hamas's violent coup in the Gaza Strip. Hamas spokesman Fazi Barhoum said of the election that, quote, "This proves that despite the hard and complicated situation, the movement could finish its elections in all of its phases and elect Ismail Haniyeh. This proves that the movement is democratic, renewed, and based on consultation," end quote. Newly elected Hamas head Haniyeh is also believed to be one of the primary authors of a new Hamas document that reasserts the terrorist organization's goal of overthrowing Israel, but also accepts a Palestinian state based on the 1967 borderlines.
شيء كثير مهم جدا انه كمان يعرف الجميع بانه هذه الوثيقه لم تاتي بناء على ضغوطات من اي طرف كان بقدر ما انها نتاج المطابخ المتعدده داخل هذه الحركه خلال ال4 سنوات الماضيه، واللي كان اليوم هو يوم الاشهار عنها والاعلان بهذا الوضوح وبهذه السعه وبهذا الاتساع اللي احنا شفناه.
Israel has dismissed the new Hamas document as an attempt to fool the world.
Israel's super-secret security services have historically been so off of the radar that if I even told you what their annual budgets were, well, you know the rest of that expression, I'd have to kill you. But now that's all changed, and I'm authorized to tell you that both the Mossad and the Shin Bet are about to receive more financing than ever before. The annual combined amount the agencies will be given for operations in 2018 is $2.4 billion. That's 10% more than they're getting this year and double what they were allocated in 2005. This information used to be so secret it was hidden as part of defense costs. When there were complaints this procedure inflated that ministry's budget, the government agreed to transfer the expenses to the finance ministry, jointly logged under the heading of just Code 31. The Shin Bet's responsible for internal security, similar to the FBI in the United States, and its motto is the defender that shall not be seen. Even though it's larger and usually takes the lion's share of that funding, it's believed that a considerable portion of the increased budget will go to the Mossad. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has substantially increased financing for both agencies since taking office in 2009. But his complete trust in the current Mossad head is reportedly leading to an expansion of its operations. The Mossad is largely responsible for preventing terrorism emanating from overseas. Its slogan comes from the Bible, Proverbs 11:14, reading, "Where there is no guidance, a nation falls, but in an abundance of counselors, there is safety." The annual Jerusalem Post conference has kicked off in New York City, and tons of Israeli officials, American policymakers, and Jewish leaders are gathering to discuss some of the most pressing issues that the Jewish world is facing today. Joining us now live from the conference in Times Square is ILTV reporter Ron Jacobson. Thanks so much for joining us, Ron.
Hey, Natasha.
So first off, who are some of the faces that we're seeing at this year's conference?
Well, so far we had on stage Yuval Steinitz and Israel Katz, as well as Bougie Herzog. Now behind me is talking the president of the World Jewish Congress, Ron Lauder. I think one of the most interesting things that we've heard so far was Bougie Herzog talking about creating a new centrist party after the primaries in the Labour Party on July 4th. So maybe this is a headline here that came out of this conference.
Now, can you give us a little bit more details about what that would entail? Who would be part of that centrist party?
Well, he mentioned Bughi Alon, he mentioned General Ashkenazi, and he mentioned Orly Levy by name, and he said some other major player in the center left. I don't know who he meant, maybe Yesh Atid, Yair Lapid, but if obviously if Yair Lapid is going to join him, he will not be number 2 or 3. So it's going to be interesting to say the least.
Absolutely. So, what are some of the other most pressing issues that we're seeing on the agenda for the Jerusalem Post conference, but more specifically regarding Israel?
So we saw the ministers, the Minister Katz and Minister Steinitz, talking about the Israeli agenda, talking about the Iranian threat, about Syria and Iran, and also talking about the new or renewed relationship between Israel and the United States with President Trump and his upcoming visit to Jerusalem.
Now, this is the first time that this event is taking place since Donald Trump has become president. What is the atmosphere like? Does it feel like, he's really living up to the expectations of the leaders at this conference?
Well, I must say that more leaders who lean towards the right are in this conference. So obviously they're very happy with Trump in the White House and are full of hope of what the new administration will do towards Israel.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Ron Jacobson from ILTV.
Thank you.
Anyone who's ever been engaged knows that planning a wedding can be stressful. If you're lucky, you only get married once, so there's a lot of pressure to find the perfect caterer, florist, and wedding hall. Well, one new Israeli app has just made all that stress much more manageable. Joining me today in the studio is Dana Halperin, CEO and founder of the We Do Wedding app. Thank you so much for coming in, Dana.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, so tell us a little bit about what this app does.
Okay, so it's a wedding inspiration app for couples that are about to get married, specifically tailored for couples that are getting married in Israel. We provide a comprehensive solution for the couples, from finding the right venue and the perfect dress, all the way to the hair designer and makeup artist and wedding florist.
Interesting. So first of all, how did you come up with the idea for this app? What makes it different than other apps that exist out there right now?
So many of my friends got engaged and got married lately, and one of my best friends got married last year, and I escorted her and helped her find the right vendors for her, and that's how I discovered the complexity of the world of weddings. And I'm sure you already know that when it comes to weddings, there are so many sources of inspiration online, but a problem almost every bride encounters is that many times you find this amazing design or a gorgeous idea, but then you have to find the local vendor who can provide this work for you.
Absolutely, especially, you know, at Pinterest, for example.
Exactly.
This is somewhere that a lot of, I think, brides look, but it's not necessarily as available here in Israel. So you're able to kind of sort that out, right? So what happens if I go on your app and I see a picture of something that I like? It's the information as to who created that dress or who created that bouquet.
Yeah, exactly.
Available?
So whenever you see a photo you like, you can just simply click on it and find all the vendors behind it, find all the information you need, and also book them simply all from the app.
That's amazing. And does it help with costs as well?
In the future, yeah.
Okay, so down the line, you'll also be kind of helping both the women and men who are looking at this figure out how to kind of budget within, you know, the amount they want to spend, but also finding exactly what it is, the style that they're looking for. So very, very cool. I'm going to download this myself. I think I want to check it out. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you so much.
Now, this is a crazy story. Israel is known for its rich history, and almost every day a new archaeological discovery is made in the Holy Land. But sometimes those discoveries just fall into the wrong hands. Now it looks like the Israelis and Palestinians are actually cooperating to change that, and ILTV's Aaron Porras has more on the story.
Every year, thousands of artifacts are stolen from archaeological digs in the West Bank and are ending up in the hands of private collectors, mainly Israelis. Israeli law enforcement officials believe that hundreds of Palestinians are raiding archaeological sites in the West Bank and then selling them to antique dealers, who in turn sell them to private collectors. The IDF Civil Administration Archaeology Division only has one employee tasked with protecting close to 2,600 archaeological sites in the West Bank. Many of the artifacts in the West Bank are Jewish in nature and include ancient coins and pottery fragments, some dating as far back as 2,000 years and beyond. Archaeologist Yoni Mizrahi of the NGO Emek Shaveh says that, legally speaking, throughout the West Bank the antiquities belong to the local residents, adding that, quote, "It is also totally clear to Israel that these antiquities do not belong to it," end quote. Those familiar with the problem say that there are numerous Palestinian shops in East Jerusalem and the West Bank that deal in stolen antiquities, but no one has any idea of just how many archaeological finds are stolen from the West Bank digs each year.
An Israeli athlete is making a splash by swimming with an international group to heighten awareness for the plight of immigrants. Oded Rachav has just swum across the indivisible line dividing the U.S. and Mexico in the Pacific Ocean. His swim is part of a fundraising campaign for a human rights group working to alleviate the suffering of Mexican families whose relatives have died while trying to enter America. The symbolic act comes amid the vow from U.S. President Donald Trump to build a wall between the two countries. The convoy dove into the waters off a California beach before treading around San Diego and the border fence. 4 hours later, they were welcomed by Mexican Marines and a celebratory crowd on the shores of Tijuana. The Israeli participant was among others who are linking the aquatic feat with events back home.
We came all the way to show our love and affection and our solidarity with immigrants around the world. Mexico, but we have it in the Middle East, and we have it in Africa, and we have it in Europe, and it's a world issue. So we came all the way to show that we love, we care for humanity, and it is up to us, to humans, to take care of one another.
Water connects all of us. That's what I was thinking about. You know, it's in the water, it's an invisible line. And we're all connected, we're all humans, and every life is valuable. That's what this is about.
According to the United Nations, a record number of 65.3 million people driven by hunger and violence were uprooted worldwide in 2015. That's the highest rate of global migration since World War II.
IDC Summer Ulpan, open for everyone.
And now for our Hebrew word of the day. An international group of swimmers have just swum across the Mexican-U.S. border in the middle of the Pacific Ocean to raise awareness for the plight of refugees and migrants worldwide. So today's word is sahian, meaning swimmer. Whether you're swimming a marathon or just going for a quick dip, there are all sorts of ways you could be described as a sahian. Being sahianim or swimmers has its advantages too. Aside from being a great way to exercise, lischot or to swim is also also analogous with perseverance, and here in the Jewish national homeland, we need a lot of that. So in the great wise words of Dory the fish, bring out your inner Sachian and just keep swimming. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight should be clear to partly cloudy with a low of 60 or 16 degrees Celsius. And tomorrow you can expect clear skies and a rise in temperature with a high of 85 or 29 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.59 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Natasha Kirchak, and thanks for watching.